3 more ways that you can make money podcasting that you probably haven't thought about. Have you ever wondered if there's more to podcast monetization than just ads and sponsorship? Well, there is a lot more. And today I'm unlocking 3 additional creative strategies. I've done an episode like this in the past, but these are new strategies that could significantly boost your podcast revenue, strategies that are right under your nose, but you may never have thought about. So stay tuned, because this episode of Legit Podcast Pro might just change the way you think about making money with your podcast. I'm Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer, and we are about to dive deep into the world of podcasting profit. So let's jump right in. Welcome back to Legit Podcast Pro, folks. I'm Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer, and today embarking on an exciting journey into the world of podcast monetization. We've got some great groundbreaking strategies to discuss, strategies that go beyond the conventional and delve into some innovative ways to turn your show into a profit-making venture. So buckle up. Let's explore some unique avenues. Well, first off is the hosted experiences and events approach. Imagine taking a community that you've built around your podcast and leveraging them by bringing them together for live events. This could be anything from just a live podcast recording session where folks come out to see you do your show live. I've done this myself with Entertainment Law Update and had a lot of fun with bar associations and other kinds of events. But you could have people coming in and pay a small admission price. You could do workshops or retreats centered around your podcast theme. You could have courses, classes, or it could just be, podcast cruise or something like that. If you've got an audience that loves what you do, loves each other, feels like there's a community, you can definitely jump in and do this. So the considerations you have to think of how to do this. First off, identify a theme. What is the central theme that your podcast revolves around that can also be expanded into that live event? What is it that your audience is clamoring for more of? And can you present that in a live format? And then engage your audience. Use the podcast and social media to identify their interest, gather ideas, get them to, pre-register or at least give you a heads up. Yes, I'm interested, those kinds of things. And then get into the planning, the logistics, select the venue, decide on the scale. Is this going to be a local meetup or a more national conference? Consider what the format of the event is going to be. Is it going to be a teaching format or just a meetup format, sitting down over a meal, keynote speeches, could be classes, hands-on workshop, could be lots of different things depending on your show. Now, the upside of this is, of course, it deepens those community ties. These kinds of events foster a stronger bond with your audience. Just ask anybody who attends the podcast conferences, Podfest or Podcast Movement. We feel a family, kind of an affinity to each other from being in these conferences and attending and these kinds of things, and the willingness and desire to help each other and do more with each other is just great. It can bring new revenue streams. You could do ticket sales or sponsorships, merchandising at these events, all can significantly boost your income. And live events like this can elevate your brand and make it more visible and reputable. So brand expansion is another thing, but that's not without its cons, its challenges. First of all, logistics can be a real headache. Planning and executing events is a complex, time-consuming, long-range planning project. Don't think you're going to just do something next month and get it up and going. Choosing dates and times and venues and things like that, it could be a year in advance or longer that you have to be thinking about these things. Upfront costs can be significant as well. You've got to put down deposits on venues and equipment. You have to pay for printing and advertising and all those kinds of things. There's lots of other logistics that could require a significant initial investment. So you'll either want to be investing your own resources or having some sponsors coming on early to back the project and make sure it gets off the ground. There's a real world example of these kinds of things. I've already mentioned Podfest and Podcast Movement, where the theme and the center is around the podcasting industry and community. But Mark Maron, with his WTF podcast, he occasionally does live sessions in front of an audience. These events allow his fans to experience the show in a new interactive way, and it provides a kind of intimacy that his regular episodes just don't. They're not just lucrative through ticket sales, but they also enhance listener loyalty and engagement. People feel like they're part of the club, part of the group, part of the family, and that's really good. Now, another strategy for raising money with your podcast is custom merchandise or limited editions. Now, this involves creating merchandise that really reflects the identity of your podcast and its community. So think outside the basic t-shirt and coffee mug box. Consider custom, limited edition kinds of items that your audience would really treasure and hold on to for a long time as a keepsake. So, how to do this? Well, start by identifying the things that resonate for your audience and what aspects of your podcast do the listeners really love the most, and use those as the basis for your merchandise. Do you have a catchphrase or a slogan, or is there something in the visuals that you do in your show that folks would love to have a little piece of? You could do t-shirts and sweatshirts, of course, but you could do commemorative tiles or beach toys, or all kinds of things that could be really cool as collectibles as well. Choose a quality partner for the custom limited runs that you're going to be printing. Use manufacturing and fulfillment partners that offer quality products, reliable service, on-time delivery, those kinds of things, and who stand behind their products for sure. And then you have to market strategically. You can launch your merchandise in alignment with any special episodes you have or events to maximize impact. If you could, this can tie in nicely with those live events we were talking about, because you can have event-specific merchandise that only people who attend the event can get, or you could have merchandise that can be pre-sold to sort of help defray the startup cost of getting those events up and going. So the upside of doing this strategy, the merchandising and limited edition strategy, is increased revenue, of course. If you have good, well-crafted, unique merchandise, that can command some premium prices. People will pay more than the value of the lunchbox for a lunchbox with your logo and stuff on, especially if it's packed with other kinds of goodies that you've curated or something like that. Enhanced brand identity. The merchandise solidifies your podcast as a brand out in the physical world, and by being seen on or in the hands of people in the community, it may help expand your audience as well. This kind of merchandise, offering this kind of stuff, can really be great for audience engagement, because it involves the audience more deeply with the whole community as a whole, and people start to build up that sense of affinity and those kinds of things. Now, the downside, of course, is that if there isn't much demand for your items, then you're going to end up with unsold stock, that inventory storage risk that you might have, or you might end up destroying or liquidating somehow merchandise that just can't be sold. Quality control. You have to make sure that the merchandise meets your and your audience's expectations, and that can require some real diligence. And some products carry a lot of liability if they're not working right, or if they break in use and could cause somebody some injury. So you do have some concerns there. Real world example of the merchandising strategy, the Adventure Zone podcast has limited edition graphic novels. They transform their episodes into these beautifully illustrated books, and they then sell. Their audience loves them. Their audiences love the storytelling, and this is a new format. So even though they've heard the show, they buy the book as well, so they can share it with their family or with friends that don't listen to podcasts or whatever else. Now, the third strategy that I want to talk about comes right out of that. It's licensing your content and intellectual property. This could involve, and usually does involve, finding some external parties that are interested in repurposing your podcast content. From educational material to adaptations in other media, vast possibilities exist. So how do you do this? Well, you have to identify those potential partners. They aren't necessarily, or not usually, going to come looking for you. So you look for companies, educational institutions, media platforms, anybody that aligns with your content and your audience, and is looking for a similar kind of an audience, could be very valuable. You have to understand the value of what you are bringing to the party. Know that it offers what it offers, know how it offers that value, and be really confident in making that pitch, because that confidence is just super important. And then negotiate your deal wisely. Be very clear about what rights are being granted, how it's going to be used, compensation, all of those kinds of things. Now, The pros of this, of course, is that once you have the deal in place, then that license arrangement could offer some steady income without much additional work. It'll help you to introduce your podcast to new audiences, more of that brand expansion that I was talking about. And it gives your content some new life and relevance in different formats and platforms. The downside, of course, you may not have as much control over the content of how your content is used when it's transferring into other media under other people's control. So just be aware of that. The negotiations of these kinds of licensing deals can sometimes get a little complicated, and you probably will want to consult with a licensing expert, a lawyer who does this kind of thing. Entertainment and media lawyers like myself do this kind of thing. And you just get some good advice. Don't go in blindly, and don't go in thinking you got it figured out, because there's always stuff. So I want to share a few examples of some ways to monetize with this licensing strategy. But before I do that, I just want to encourage you, if you like this content, be sure you click the like, the subscribe, the notify buttons, those kinds of things, so you don't miss an episode. And please do tell your friends and colleagues about it. Share us widely if you can, because that's how we grow the show. And while you're at it, check out our free podcast success blueprint over at podcastertraining.com. You will learn how to avoid or overcome the most common legal and business mistakes that stall podcast growth and limit profit. And I'd love to have you come check that out. It's podcastertraining.com. All right, back to the episode. Licensing your podcast content and intellectual property can take several forms. Each offers unique opportunities for revenue generation, brand expansion, and so on. So here's a few examples that illustrate how podcasters can do this kind of thing. 1, syndication to radio stations or streaming services. Your podcast episodes are valuable content that can be licensed to radio stations or online streaming platforms that want to include your content in their programming. Now, this can expand your audience reach and provide a steady income. For example, a popular tech podcast might license its episodes to a satellite radio station or streaming service, or a local radio station that specializes in or has a segment of its time slot focused on technology and innovative content. You might be surprised to learn that local radio stations are clamoring for programming that they think their audiences will enjoy. After all, they're in the business of selling advertising against that content, and they'd be delighted to have some fresh stuff to share. You might even get to hold on to some of that ad inventory that you can then sell yourself. There are deals of all sorts to be made if you go looking. There are terms like barter deals and syndication deals and those kinds of things. So do open up your eyes and think outside that box a little bit. Another strategy is in-flight and onboard entertainment systems on the airlines and cruise ships. These folks are always looking for engaging content that they can include in their entertainment offerings. Licensing your podcast episode to be a part of this entertainment package can be, well, it can earn you license fees, but it could also introduce your show to a new captive global audience. A travel podcast might find its episodes in the travel section of an airline's in-flight entertainment system, reaching those international travelers. But don't be afraid. Again, think outside the box and the norm. It doesn't have to be travel related. Food shows, cooking shows, hobbies, even history or current events programming can find a home in those travelers' earbuds. And it really is a great way to introduce your show to new audiences that might not have gone looking for you in the normal podcast channels. But then hopefully they'll follow you over there. Number 3, education and training materials. Institutions, corporate training programs, they all license podcast content as part of their curriculum or training sessions, especially when your content offers valuable insights on relevant subjects like leadership, technology, psychology, recovery, personal growth, those kinds of things. So an example might be a podcast that focuses on leadership and personal development could license its episodes to a corporate training company that's developing courses or executive training programs. It might become the content itself, or it might become the outline or the raw material from which their content is built. So keep your eye out for those opportunities. And these could also turn into valuable public speaking or teaching opportunities if you play your cards right. The 4th one I want to give you is books, ebooks, and audiobooks. The content of your podcast can easily be adapted and expanded into books or ebooks or audio versions. This not only serves as a new product, but also as a way to reach audiences that just prefer that those formats, reading over listening. So, for example, a podcast that tells unique historical stories might license the rights to a publisher that will then create a series of history books or audiobooks based on these episodes. I know of one very niche podcaster that has turned each season of his theater industry oriented podcast into not a volume. So he's 5 seasons in, he's got 5 books out, and he's had great success selling those books not only to his listeners but to new audiences that find him on the bookshelves as well. And if you do a little marketing in the internet space, you can probably sell it on Kindle and other ebook versions as well. So there's lots of opportunity there. And then fifth, last but certainly not least, television and film adaptation is definitely a thing. Your podcast content, or just the concept of your show, the format of your show, could be adapted into a television series, or maybe a documentary film or a feature. This is particularly common with shows that have a strong narrative thread or a unique concept. So a true crime or investigative podcast might be adapted into a documentary series for a streaming channel, or with the original podcast creators being involved as producers or consultants, or maybe even the on-camera talent in that show. Just be careful, because in this arena, there are lots of self-styled producers, and I put that in air quotes, out there who will hitch their wagon to your show, but don't really have the know-how, ability, or the connections to actually make things happen in the real world entertainment industry. So be sure, if you're going to go down this path, talk to an experienced entertainment lawyer like myself before you sign any kind of a deal. I just don't want you to get burned, like I see, unfortunately, so many people getting burned by being stuck in these long-lasting deals with people who are just not doing anything, but then they're along for the ride and tagging along with the project, either slowing or weighing it down completely. So there you have it. This should showcase for you the versatility of podcast content and intellectual property in generating revenue and reaching new audiences through various channels. Licensing agreements do need to be carefully negotiated to protect your rights and ensure fair compensation. So do talk with a qualified legal professional experienced in entertainment, media, intellectual property law, those kinds of things. Monetizing your podcast through hosted events and custom merchandise and licensing can open up a world of possibilities. Each strategy offers its own set of advantages and challenge, but the key to success lies in aligning these strategies with your podcast's identity and your audience's expectations. So experiment, engage your listeners, and don't shy away from seeking advice when you're getting into these new territories. Now, that's all for today's deep dive into innovative podcast monetization strategies. I'm Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer, reminding you that your podcast potential extends far beyond traditional advertising. So keep on exploring, keep innovating, and as always, keep it legal. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, happy podcasting.